Hello, it's nice to see you all. What I'll be doing is I'll be trying to looking at if this new economy is going to be really large scale, what will be some of the elements that will make its way into normal businesses, all the established businesses, not the startups, not the people who are experimenting, but the regular businesses that are already existing. What elements can they maybe use to renew their own business? So what I'll be trying to look at is, if we're talking about a new normal, what will be some of these new elements that you have to take into consideration when you're developing a business in the future? And then also talk a little bit about some of the risks that we are facing as businesses trying to use some of these elements, because it's not all that easy if you're changing your current paradigm. So one of the main things, and I think Castorama was a very good example of this, is that your design focus changes completely if you try to use these methods. You are going from producing a finished product and you're just selling it to a consumer, to instead what you're doing when you're developing new products is you're trying to understand, how can I create a toolbox or a platform that enables me to involve users in co-creating the value. So it's about managing a process rather than producing a finished product. And this is a very, very different way of thinking. Another way of putting this is this idea that you go from, you used to be a provider who provides stuff that's finished, and now you're enabling that whatever the customer wants to get from this will actually happen. So this is a very, almost banal example, but the old-fashioned way of looking at this is, if you're in the hotel business, you will provide finished hotel rooms, and you are the person who owns it, and you will, make it available to your customers. While if you are Airbnb, what you'll do is that you will create a platform where you broker between someone who wants a room and someone who has a room to spare. So you are creating a process that enables the value to be created, but you are not actually providing the finished product. And exactly the same thing you can say about broadcasting. It used to be that we'd have these great big media, broadcast media, and they would make one finished product and everybody would watch that product, and only a few select people could create that finished product. Well, if you look at mass media now, these are the 10 largest websites in the world. These are very, very different types of media than the old broadcast media, because now 7 out of these are actually media where the company that owns it does not create the content. The company that owns this media just makes the platform available, and then the users create the content that they're using together. So it's a very different way of seeing your role in creating value as a business. But nevertheless, of course, this will be part of the way that you need to think as a normal business. Even if you look at physical products, you look like this could be cameras, it could be a guitar, it could be a medical piece of equipment or whatever. I think that if you look ahead, you will see that you will have a physical product, and then you will have a sort of superstructure on top of that product. And this superstructure will be all the processes that create a lot of value for the user of the product, and which really distinguishes that product to the users. So if you're selling cameras, if you don't have a great community of users, you don't have a website where you can see how to use the camera and make the most of the camera, you're not getting the full value out of that camera. And it's a way of getting out of the trap of commoditization. So one camera is just about the same as the next camera, and what you're basically competing on is price right at the moment. That's called commoditization. But if you create this superstructure where users participate in creating the value for each other, then suddenly your product becomes of much greater value. So this is a way that a regular business that's just into producing stuff can actually add another layer with much more relevance and much more value to its users. The next level of this, of course, would be that the product and the superstructure of services becomes indistinguishable, where it doesn't make sense to sell a product without having a community online that would create this value for you. And I think if we look at objects such as the 3D printers, I think if you buy a MakerBot today, if there wasn't a huge online community where you could exchange recipes and get good advice and help each other, the product would not make sense. So I think that increasingly, and this goes for every business, I think that when you're producing a product, what you will create is a mixture of a physical platform or a physical product and a superstructure, and those two, you cannot separate them. It's a part of the total value of the product. So if we compare this to the way that industry used to work, in the industrial age, it was very much about mass production, it was about uniform products, and it was about one company sort of broadcasting Fortis or whatever industrial object to passive consumers. And I think that another example of how this sharing economy will be part of regular business is that consumers will be much more participants in creating and designing the products that they use themselves. So the way to distinguish yourself in the future would be much more like this, where you have a tool available that makes it possible for me to design exactly the physical object I want. And in fact, you can look at a place like Lego company, the Danish toy manufacturer, who has very ambitiously made platforms where they involve users in actually designing products, and they will put it in a gallery, and if a lot of people like the product, they will try to mature it into commercial use. So now you have this thing that where you're not just creating products and giving it to me, you're not doing stuff for me or to me, you're trying to make people part of doing something together with you, and that they can do it by themselves. So it's a very different attitude towards your role in business, because now you are a co-creator, you are a participant along with your users who are also participants. And I don't think producers and consumers will completely integrate and be the same thing, but I think that increasingly we will have more of an overlap between who's a producer and who's a consumer. So I think if you're managing a project, I think what it does is that it gives you a new challenge, because you can't just hand out orders if those are not your employees. They are not your subordinates anymore. If you want to motivate people to participate, the power you have is in the inspiration and leadership you can give. So this is just a different way of as a manager where you need to organize. And I think this is one of the things that traditional companies really have to learn, is that they cannot manage by orders anymore. It's a community, and that's a different thing. Another new role that you need to learn if you're coming from sort of the conventional mode of thinking of business is that your role as an expert used to be that you could create this, you knew how to do stuff. You knew how to do this perfect product. But now, what your expertise, if you want to engage other people in the value creation, is that your expertise lies in making it happen, making value happen for your users. So if you're a teacher, you don't want to be an expert on your subject. You want to be an expert in making learning happen. If you're an expert in medical affairs, you want to make health happen. And if you're an innovator, you want the innovation to come together, but it doesn't have to be you yourself who are doing it. So it's a different role you have to take. Another fundamental challenge to business, of course, is that it's not just about money. You have to recognize that a lot of the people who are working with you are not doing it for money. And you can't just milk them for all it's worth. You need to engage them, and you have to somehow give them back in another currency than just money. And again, this is a major shift that companies need to learn. And I think maybe the most important part of this is that if you are a business, you're used to this environment of competition, where what I do is for me only. And I think as the world becomes more connected and it becomes a place where we deal with complex issues together, I think this mindset of the me does not make sense anymore. This idea that you have to see yourself instead as a we, that my fate is linked to yours, and the success of me as a company depends on creating success for everybody around me, even though it's sort of an indirect investment, because I can't see the benefits coming back to me immediately. I think this is a major change that you need to make as a business. But I think this will come. I think there's so many things happening in the world in terms of environmental, all kind of ethical requirements, that this will be a mindset that you will need to acquire. So I think that is a primary thing. Okay, so it's not an absolute shift. We will not be outside competition anymore. But I think this thing of negotiating a more shared idea of what is business and seeing that my success depends on others, that is a fundamental shift that we have to make in business. And with that, those were just some introductory remarks to how business must change in the coming year. Okay, so a few remarks at the end here. I think that if you look at this is really, really hard for the medium-sized companies. It's easy for a startup because they have nothing to lose. And it's easy for a gigantic company because they can sort of write it off as an experiment. It doesn't matter. But if you're a medium-sized company with a lot to lose, you really have to figure out, how do I make this operational? How do I take these chances? And I think what this raises is the issue. We need a research agenda to create a list of tools that makes this a lot safer for us. We need mechanisms for building up trust. We need ways of creating confidence around legal issues. If I share my copyright, what will happen to it? How do I give some copyright away? We need organizational models for cooperating across commercial and non-commercial boundaries. We need taxation, regulations, all these things. And maybe first of all, we need a vocabulary that allows us to describe these things and talk about them and know exactly what each are doing. So I think this is what's going to happen in the coming years when we mature this industry and it merges with business as normal. I think a lot of what we're talking about today, a lot of that will peel away. It's like mutants in biology. Some of it will just die off. But a few concepts will stick, and we need to have those words so everybody knows what it's about and what are the legal implications of that. So I'm working on trying to figure that out. You can find more about my work at these web addresses, and if anybody wants to discuss it, I'd be happy to do so. And now I think I'm finished. Thank you very much.